It was National Early Signing Day for football yesterday, and it was quite eventful for the Louisville Cardinals. We'll talk about everything that transpired on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode is brought to you by Netsuite. Netsuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Head to netsuite.com/lockedoncaa for special end-of-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. Also want to take this time to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I mentioned, it was quite an eventful signing day, National Early Signing Day, I should clarify. For the Louisville Cardinal football program, they received 3 more signatures that were not already a part of the group of commits. But I want to break the National Signing Day or the early National Signing Day down. Basically completely. And I want to start out by explaining why a lot of the Louisville fan base is overlooking this class and not giving the props that it deserves. I want to transition then into analyzing, each member of Flyville 22 and, kind of breaking down their respective games briefly. And then finally, we'll look at who are some of the more underrated prospects in the class, who has the highest upside, etc. Before we get into the content side of things, you can follow my personal Twitter in the graphic in the handle below. For those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, where I serve as both a football beat writer and a recruiting analyst. You can follow my personal Twitter, like I mentioned, in the graphic in the handle below. You can also follow the podcast Twitter page at LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into it. Just a little recap. The Cardinals signed 13 players, their national letters of intent, along with 4 transfers. It was a very successful day for the Cards. 3 players committed that had not already been part of the class. Those 3, Devon Mortimer. You also had offensive lineman Maquette Gay. I may be mispronouncing that, Gay. One of the two. Forgive me for mispronouncing that, but got a commitment from him, and also wide receiver Chris Bell. So the Cards class, like I mentioned, very small, 13 members in total, 60th in the country, which has caused a little bit of backlash from the fan base. And there's some levels to it. I think, first of all, the number 60 in the 4th recruiting cycle under Scott Satterfield and company. Obviously, you want it to be a little higher. But, make no mistake about it. I think that context really matters in this situation. And Keith Winnie for Card Chronicle really broke this down in depth. You'll have to check out his Twitter if you're, chances are if you're listening to this podcast, you're familiar with who he is. He broke this down very, simply and, to the point in saying that, hey, look, if you look at some of the teams that had been rated higher, for example, the 28 through 30 range, Maryland, Iowa State, Virginia Tech, all had player average recruit rankings in the 86 range, but Maryland, 19 commits. They're in 28th place. Iowa State, 21 commits. Virginia Tech in 30th with 22 commits. So I think that there's a little bit of outrage kind of directed in the wrong places, because we already knew that this was going to be a small class. I mean, between the redshirt freshmen of the 2019 cycle, the COVID freshman of 2020, and Flyville 21, I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, I feel like Scott Satterfield said there's like 70 underclassmen on this team. So, it's very young. So, in turn, the recruiting class wasn't going to be as big. You were going to see, 10, 12, maybe even just a tad bit more high school recruits in this class, along with maybe the same amount of transfers. And we've seen 4 transfers come in, which we've talked about on this show. So I think that You have to be able to accept for what it is, and the reason why it's at 60 and not in the 30s where, if they were to continue the trend, I mean, there's 3 4 stars in this class, but the average rating for a recruit in this class is 0.8635. And for those who don't follow recruiting a lot, that's on par or even a little better than what Louisville has been doing over the past 20 years, since 2002 on 24/7 Sports, which in my opinion is the most reliable recruiting database and network since 2002. Every single recruiting class that Louisville has taken in, only one, and that was the 2018 class, has been rated higher per average recruit than this class that came in 2018. So this class, although it is small in numbers, like I said, only 13 high school recruits in this class so far. That number might go up, one or two. But if they were to have 19, 20, 25 commits in this class, if they were to continue the pace, there's a good chance that we're talking about a top 35 class, and people are, saying hallelujah and praising Satterfield. But just the fact that they see that 60 number, I think that gets to people's mind way too much, because when you consider the context and realize that, hey, look, from a pure number standpoint, we didn't take as many high school guys. Got 3 4 stars out of the 13 overall commits. Other ones were some higher 3 stars. Excuse me. I just think that the outrage is a little misguided, just because if you dig a little bit beneath the surface, I know it's not aesthetically pleasing to see that Louisville's in 60th, and you're probably not going to get a positive reaction from other fan bases and all this other stuff. And I don't want it to get twisted. I mean, obviously, you want at the end of the day to get 5, 6, 7, 8 4 stars in a class. Of course you do, and I don't think anybody's arguing that. I mean, if you ask the Louisville coaching staff, wouldn't you want to get 5, 6, 7, 8 4 stars in this class? I mean, they'd be like, oh, well, of course we would. I mean, but at the end of the day, this recruiting class by average recruit ranking is on par with how Louisville has recruited over the past 20 years. I mean, you look at that great class of 2011 had a lower average recruit ranking than this class. And I'm not saying it's going to be as good, because hindsight is always 20/20. So, I mean, you can always go back and say, well, Lamar Jackson turned out to be a Heisman Trophy winner. Teddy Bridgewater turned out to be a first-team All-American. Yeah, sure. But, I mean, none of these guys have played a single snap yet. We're speaking specifically from the recruiting rankings. So, a lot of people will compare the team down the road, who Kentucky, I think right now has the 11th ranked recruiting class, and I think that I think it's a bit unfair to compare both scenarios, because one is in year 4 of a total rebuild, and the other is in I forget which year Stoops came in, but I feel like he's closer to 10 than he is 5. It's 7, 8, 9. Forgive me for not necessarily knowing that, but they're in different stages of their respective recruitment. Then you throw in everything with the NIL. I'm interested to see how Louisville navigates the name, image, and likeness waters. Scott Satterfield basically said, look, it's basically free agency, and you have to get with the times or you're going to get left behind. And I think he's spot on with that. But I think overall, this recruiting class, even with the smaller numbers, there's some quality prospects that are going to come in to help this team, some sooner than others. And we'll talk about, each one of those commits here in the next segment. But overall, I would caution the fan base to overlook this class just because it has that 60 ranking next to it. You have to factor in the fact that the average recruit ranking is right on par with what Louisville has been doing, in the past 20 seasons. And then not only that, I mean, 13 high school players. I mean, that's barely half of what you're allowed to sign with 25. So, I mean, who knows what happens if they're allowed to sign 25, but they have so many underclassmen that they physically could not take anymore. So we'll continue to talk about the recruits in depth in terms of individuals here in just a second, after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Netsuite. So I want you to imagine a scenario. So this is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. And I have to ask, is this how you're running your business? poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software. To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth with visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, planning, budgeting, and much more. NetSuite is everything you need to grow all in one place. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time while staying well ahead of the competition. Over 27,000 businesses already use NetSuite, and right now, through the end of the year, NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financing program to those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/lockedonncaa. Head to netsuite.com/lockedonncaa for special end-of-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses, netsuite.com/lockedonncaa. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day, and be sure to check out the Ultimate College Football Playoff Preview 2021 with local experts, betting advice, and draft analysis. The most comprehensive college football playoff preview begins this Friday. All right, so we are going to dive into each commitment, or signee, I should say, with it being official, and kind of talk about the respective games and the positions in which it is filled out in this class. And I think what really jumps off the page first when we look at Flyville 22 is the addressing of the defensive line. I think if you ask most Louisville fans, and if you ask a lot of people that cover the team, most will probably say that defensive line is one of, if not the most important position to recruit for this class. And two of the 3 4-stars that Louisville has brought in has been on the defensive line. The first one being most notable, the Louisville male high school standout Selah Brown, also 4-star edge Popeye Williams. I think that both of these guys are going to be two that could see time pretty quickly, especially Popeye Williams. Scott Satterfield said in his early signing day press conference recap on Wednesday afternoon that Popeye Williams is a guy that they look forward to coming in and making an instant impact, I should say, as a pass rusher off the edge. Selah Brown, it is yet to be determined whether he has moved to the interior or to one of the edge positions, but regardless of a talented player that I'm excited to see how they find ways for him to play. But ever since I've seen him play the past couple of years, he's extremely disruptive, has a lot of twitch off the defensive line, a good amount of burst. Popeye Williams the same way. Both are kind of comparable in size, 6'2", 6'3" range. Popeye 230 pounds, 251 pounds for Selah. So both of these guys are going to be players that I could see coming in and playing right away, especially if they look to use Selah as an interior defensive lineman. Speaking of interior defensive lineman, the other one at the position that they took was of Tampa, Florida native Tawfiq Thomas. And I could be pronouncing that wrong. Like I said, if I'm pronouncing these names wrong, please forgive me. Obviously, there's no malice into that. Thomas saw a little bit of a ratings bump. He's now a top 900 player, 6'3", 325-pound nose tackle. That's something that Louisville has been lacking for the past couple seasons, is a stopgap that you can put in the middle that really excels in the run and can get after the quarterback as well and just overall disrupt plays at the line of scrimmage. And this is a good opportunity to, get one of those disruptive players. And I think that at the end of the day, Satterfield and company, I think it was Brian Brown that said, they want to get a little bigger on the defensive line, get a little more size. And what better way to do that than add a 6'3", 325-pound lineman. So very excited to see what these defensive linemen can do, but I think that that's definitely the headline of the class. Going to the other side of the trenches, a slew of offensive linemen that have committed, beginning with offensive tackle from Jackson, Tennessee, Isaiah Reed, who's ranked on 24/7 Sports as the 860th player in the country. I know that there's a new recruiting database called On3 Sports that has him a little higher. He played a little bit of D-line, and in high school, but he kind of went both ways. In terms of offensive line, more of a tackle, played left tackle at Jackson Northside High School. very nimble on his feet, good size at the 6'6", 295 pounds. He's a player that I could possibly see like a Michael Gonzalez from last year. One of those underrated, under the radar guys that comes in and shines during camp and basically forces the staff to play him. So, but there's a couple other offensive linemen that fill out this class, and they're a little bit underrated. Max Cabana being the first one, 6'5.5", 275 pounds. He's a player that he's from Canada, so and actually played hockey as a youth. So he's just now kind of getting recognized, has a lot of interest from the Ivy League schools, has some good size. His tape is pretty notable. I actually enjoyed watching his tape. I think he's one of those players that just didn't get a lot of recognition because of the opportunities to find some exposure. The same way with Maquette Gay, like I mentioned, I could be pronouncing that wrong. 6'7", 265 pounds. He's originally from Senegal and just started playing football this last year. Played basketball down in Florida, where he's at Venice High School now. Played both tight end and D tackle before finding his place at right tackle. So he's one of those players to where I feel like both of these guys, obviously Louisville returns a very veteran-led offensive line group. So the good thing is you can give these guys to Jack Bicknell, let them develop in his system and get their technique and fundamentals down, get their body right, and hopefully, in year 2 or year 3 can be some very serviceable and high upside guys. Finishing out the offense, there's a handful of guys, especially at the wide receiving core position. We talked about the highest rated guy in the class right now, Devon Mortimer, the flip from Florida State on early signing day, 5'9", 160. He's got a lot of hype from 24/7 Sports, from Andrew Ivins, the Southeast recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports. Basically compares him to Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Jesus Wilson. He says he's a playmaking slot receiver that doubles as a dangerous return man. He has elite foot speed. And although he's 5'9", plays with a much bigger catch radius than his frame would initially suggest, has all conference type of upside if everything comes together. Really kind of reminds me of Amari Huggins-Bruce, just a guy that can take it to the house at any given time. And that's something that it seems like Louisville has kind of found as their MO in the wide receiving room, is maybe not the biggest guys, but guys that can really take it to the house. Speaking of taking it to the house, one of the other guys that they were able to get on early signing day over Mississippi State is 6'2" receiver Chris Bell, 3-star receiver he's ranked as the 1,387th best prospect from Yazoo City, Mississippi. A solid recruiting win for the Cards over the Bulldogs. I think he's pretty solid. We'll talk about him here in the next segment. The other wide receivers in the class, 6'6" Chance Morrow, who's got some big-time offers, a home run jump ball threat that definitely could come into the offense in situational packages along the goal line in year 1 potentially. You have an all-purpose back in you have all-purpose back in Maurice Turner, 5'8", 170. It's kind of yet to be seen whether they're going to use him as a running back, wide receiver, or even a hybrid, but definitely very quick for that 5', 170-pound frame. You also have tight end Nate Kariski from Gonzaga High School in the nation's capital, 6'3", 235. That joins the high school. He joins the tight end room that's got a lot of youth. Played outside linebacker at the high school position, but the staff saw his ability, as a decent route runner and a guy that can block and has good hands. So he's a player that rounds out the offensive side. After we talk about quarterback commit Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson is a player that 3-star. Middle of the road 3-star ranking out of Alabama, had some very, very stellar stats this season down in that high school league. Very solid arm. I think that raw in a little bit as a pocket passer, but he shows a lot of potential. I like his footwork. I think he's going to be a guy that we could be talking about as a potential Louisville starter as soon as 2023. Very quickly, going to the defensive side of things, like we said, we talked about the defensive line. The other defensive commit that isn't a transfer is safety from St. Petersburg, Florida, D'Angelo Hutchinson, who decommitted from Iowa State and shortly after committed to the Cards. 6'3", 185, good size. Kind of fits Greg Gasparado's and Brian Brown's MO at recruiting the safety position. Bigger guys that can tackle well, pack a punch when they do tackle. And I think that he is a player that could come into a safety room that needs all the depth that it can get, and we'll see how he does in spring ball. But I want to talk now about some of the more underrated prospects, the prospects with higher upside, after we talk about our friends at Boost Mobile. So you listen to podcasts for the power of the inside track, right? But you switch to Boost Mobile for the power of saving money. Get 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line and a free 5G phone when you switch, so you can get the latest sports news all on one of America's largest 5G networks. More power to save. Boost Mobile. Disclaimer, free phone limited to new customers and 1 per line. Additional restrictions apply. Offers and coverage not available everywhere or for all phones and networks. See boostmobile.com for more details. Also want to talk about our friends at Bet on the Line. Bet Online has had you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as the football season continues to march to the playoffs, and it remains your number one spot for all of the sports action. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to do so. From football, basketball, NHL, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports, and BetOnline is where the game starts. So we're going into the final segment, talking a little bit about a couple recruits that may be more under the radar than others, and the ones with the highest potential, which I guess you could say may correlate, so to speak, but not necessarily so. We'll start with the more underrated guys. I think number one is wide receiver Chris Bell. We talked a little bit about the recruiting win that was for Louisville. The Cards defeated Mississippi State in his recruitment on signing day. 6'2", 220-pound receiver from Greenville, Mississippi. When I watch his game, I really struggled to see where the rankings in the 1300s come from. I think with his size, he's very, very quick, very solid route runner. Kind of gives me Keenan Allen vibes as a route runner. He runs a 22.54 200-meter dash, runs track, the stat qualifier in the 200-meter dash as a junior, so he has that speed. I like his overall ability to high point the football at 6'2". He's kind of not necessarily a huge receiver, although he is a good size for a receiver, but he's not in the MO that Louisville's kind of been recruiting as those sub 6 foot receivers that have home run playability. But I do think he does possess that lightning in a bottle type potential. I'm interested to see how he's used. Kind of gives me Des Fitzpatrick vibes, deceptive speed, just overall solid in almost all facets of being a receiver. So Chris Bell is one of my picks for one of the most under the radar guys. The other one, and this is kind of an interesting one as well. I think that Caleb Johnson, 705th in the country, quarterback from Clay Chalkville High School in Pinson, Alabama. I don't necessarily think that he's getting the credit that he deserves either. He is only 6'1", 175 pounds, a dual threat, so he probably needs to maybe add a little bit onto that frame. The offer sheet isn't necessarily the greatest. I think outside of Louisville, Virginia Tech might be the only other. Virginia Tech and Kansas are the only other two Power 5 offers that Johnson possessed outside of Louisville. But I like his footwork. Like I said, I think he has a very strong arm. For most high school quarterbacks, it's just a matter of refining their pocket passing skills. And the good thing is he's not being forced to come in right away year one and be the guy. He is a spring early enrollee, so he's going to have a whole semester within the program to get in the weight room, to learn the playbook, to get to know the personnel and start building some rapport with the receiving corps. I'm very excited for him. interested to see what that 2023 quarterback room is going to look like for Louisville, but definitely don't sleep on Caleb Johnson. You know, a lot of people focus on Pierce Clarkson in the 2023 class as possibly being the guy for the future, and rightfully so. I mean, he's a borderline top 100 guy, but definitely don't overlook Caleb Johnson. So in terms of the high upside guys, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Popeye Williams gives me the vibes of a potential all-conference pass rusher. From Alan True, the national recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports, had to say about Popeye. His comparison was Hassan Reddick from Temple, who got drafted to the Arizona Cardinals. He says, twitchy edge rusher with some explosive qualities, seems very well schooled also. He has a subtle dip, which makes it tough for offensive linemen to get a clean punch on him. His lateral agility also makes it tough for blockers to get their hands on him in pass protection. He does a nice job with his hands. He's quick and assertive with those. He shows good closing ability, short area explosion as well. He plays with a good motor, but the main concern with him would be size. He's over 6'2" and around 225 pounds. He will have to show he can anchor in against the run against bigger college offensive linemen. He's a really good player and has some good athletic qualities. He's going to be able to rush the passer, and based on his technique and work ethic, he has a great chance to be more than that 4-3 weak side defensive end, or maybe a 3-4 outside the linebacker. I thought it was interesting. I think Louisville mentioned him as a possible linebacker coming off the edge as a pass rusher. But regardless, the good thing is Ashton Gelati showed that the strength and conditioning program at Louisville, whoever that coach is going to be, is very possible to gain some weight quickly and do it in a safe manner. And I think that Popeye Williams, maybe not year one, is going to come in and be a guy that's a substantial impact, but definitely year 2, year 3. I'm very excited to see what we could get from him just overall from, getting just a pass rusher that, has the talent there. I am excited to see. I think that the athleticism is incredible. He kind of reminds me of Lorenzo Malden, just with his burst and twitch off the edge, and I'm very excited to see what happens there. The other guy that has the most upside in this class, and this is one that I kind of went back and forth with, but I think that Isaiah Reed from Jackson Northside High School in Jackson, Tennessee, gives me those vibes as being a high draft pick on the offensive line. Like I mentioned, played both ways in high school, offensive tackle and defensive tackle, played a left tackle for his high school. When you look at what he got offer-wise, got an offer from Memphis, from Army, from Boston College, Colorado, Mississippi, Western Kentucky, etc. So maybe not necessarily the most heralded recruit, but at the end of the day, I think that he possesses the footwork. It gives me gives me like a Zen Michalski vibes for those who follow recruiting from Floyd Central, the player that was committed to Louisville, saw a shot up through the rankings and ended up decommitting and then committing to Ohio State eventually shortly after. But I like the overall ability to use his hands. I think he has a solid motor for a lineman, good footwork, very nimble on his feet for his 6'6" size. I think he does need to add a little bit of weight. Like I mentioned, he's only listed at about 295 pounds. So it is a very veteran-led group for the Louisville Cardinals this season. I'm going to be on the offensive line, so there's a chance that we might not necessarily see him early on. But I do think by year 2 and 3, he's going to be a pivotal player in this system and for Jack Bicknell. So very exciting National Early Signing Day for the Louisville Cardinals. Yes, it is only 13 signees, so definitely keep that in mind. High school signees, I should say. Keep that in mind when you assess this class. But tomorrow is going to shift back a little into basketball as we focus on the matchup with the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers over the weekend. We will also recap the Final Four matchup for the Louisville Cardinal volleyball team. Number 1 takes on number 4 in the Wisconsin Badgers in the Final Four. Hopefully it is singing songs of praise and previewing the national championship match on Saturday. We can hope. So before we get out of here, a couple quick shout outs first to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. 2 great podcasts, the 100th anniversary podcast that you can check that out at cardinalsportszone.com. and also the Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q with handicapping expert from Lee Sterling that you can find on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcasts. But that's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of this show. Everyone have a great day. Go Cards, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.